on 2 years now. We started next door in the temporary digs in January, 2019, 2017. And what it is we are a business and leadership coaching organisation. So business and leadership coaching, consulting, and something new that we're adding, and this is the Business in Bright Socks brand, which kind of relates to where we're coming from today, is business chaplaincy. And providing support. All of us in the room know that entrepreneurship and business can be quite a lonely journey, can be quite a difficult journey. It's a great quote that I'll actually get to a little bit later in the presentation that I'm going to throw in there now as well, is that in business, your best day and your worst day can be on the same day. That's just kind of what the roller coaster can be like. And so today is all about sharing a little bit of my own personal journey, and hopefully in a way that can relate to you. But we're talking on something, this idea of how to keep showing up when it's all falling down. It's going to look different to each of us in the room. So you're not going to see sort of whole slabs of big principles and stuff throughout the... Instead, in your little folder that you've got with you, there's a little bit of a handout, and on the second page of the handout, it's got sort of the 5 key points of the message. And if you find a way that relates to you personally, or there's just something in particular that speaks to you, that's just an opportunity where you can take a little, write down a quote or a point or something that relates that point to you. Because really, to get the most value out of this kind of presentation, it's going to be how do these principles matter to you and to your story. Because with 20 odd people in the room, we have got 20 or more different stories about how these kind of things have affected us. I should probably, before I go too far, get to where did the whole Bright Socks thing come from. And it's one of those things where it wasn't so much planned out as I just like to, when I get in the zone, I work with no shoes on. And one of the gifts I get, whether it's Father's Day, birthdays, Christmas, whatever, generally from my mother-in-law, are socks that are generally rather outrageous. So like the ones I've got at the moment with bright glasses on them, and yes, I have actually poked through these ones in all my walking around the hub with no shoes on. But it just come around that I was walking around a while with no shoes on, which sort of got a bit of attention, which wasn't my intention, I promise. And a joke came out, actually, we've got Linda in the room, the joke came about, we have a great partnership here with Business in Bare Feet in the SmartHub, and I would joke about how we've heard of Business in Bare Feet, but here in the hub we do business in Bright Socks. And it just evolved to a point where I actually went and said, you know what, has somebody got something tied up around this? So I went and registered the domain and set up the business, and I'll fill in the gaps later, I've got it now. So it wasn't this kind of pre-planned out thing so much as I just went, I'll get it, I'll tie it up, and I'll fill in the gaps and do something with it later. And it's now evolved into this, that's kind of the brand that our business chaplaincy is living out of. So the problem that we're here to address today is this idea, basically, that entrepreneurship and business ownership can be incredibly stressful. As a business owner, the different amounts of stress and different kinds of stress that we deal with are always present. It's something we carry all the time. Every decision that you make affects somebody, and there's just all these different kinds of stresses. How do we pay the bills? How do we do whatever? And so sometimes we feel like our mate Atlas here. Like as the owner, that if you've got staff, maybe they can come and sort of punch in, punch out, leave, whatever else. You feel like you're carrying the whole thing on your shoulders all the time. And particularly when it's not going the greatest is when this feeling can be at its biggest. Anybody else's desk sometimes look a little bit like this? I can't have my desk looking like that because I'm bang smack in the middle of the SmartHub, and I'd probably get a tap on the shoulder saying, can you kind of deal with that, please? But sometimes I feel like that's what it looks like. If you come into my office next door at 212, sometimes that's what it looked like. Because who knows, sometimes we're just kind of under this mountain of this never-ending to-do list. I have some days where I sit down and feel like I've spent my entire day ticking things off my list, and I feel really productive, and it's really, really great. And then I go and look at the list at the end of the day, and there's more things on it than when I started, despite that productivity. Does anybody else in the room feel like that, or is that just kind of, that's me? Yeah. So, and it kind of, this represents that really, really well, I think. It's just this never-ending pile of stuff. But this is the important one. How many other people are standing with this guy out on the lake there? That journey of entrepreneurship, that journey of leadership can always seem like a lonely one. There's that quote that's, I don't know who coined it, but it goes around about it being lonely at the top. A lot of us might not think of ourselves as being at the top, but when you're the business owner, you're the entrepreneur, it can be this lonely journey that nobody else really sort of understands what you're going through. You could be surrounded by people, and yet you feel like you're all alone. And so hopefully today we can address some techniques to help deal with those kind of issues, that kind of stress, that overwhelm, that feel like we're carrying the whole world, and particularly when things go wrong. Who in here this year, we're nearly towards the end of the year, as business owners has had something go wrong this year? Who's had something go wrong this month? Who's had something go wrong this week? Starting Tuesday? So when we put the hands up, you can see that we're all dealing with stuff going wrong regularly, from little things where someone on our team might have done something a little bit silly, right through to major catastrophes. Now, have all of your things, all of the problems, all of the challenges you've dealt with come from within your business? No. The biggest problem I'm going to share with you today, and I'm going to pre-warn you, it's a very personal story that I'm actually still working through. So if I stop and I take a big deep breath when we get to some stuff, you know why. It's either that or somebody else gets up, because that's how it goes. But the reality is that's come from outside of the business. But has it affected how I lead and how I run the business? Absolutely. And so how do we keep showing up day in and day out and doing what we've got to do when all of this other stuff is going on? So hopefully the promise out of today is that we can go out of here in a place that we understand that no matter what's going on, we can feel that we've got the strength to deal with it, that we've got the tactics to deal with it. And another saying I could put in there, that we can actually walk out with, yes, we've got strategies to deal with turning up and getting things done when it all goes wrong, but also that we can walk away going, you know what, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. I haven't put that slide in there, but if that's one thing we can take away, that we can all walk out and go, because we all feel like sometimes you've got to turn up, like, I know coming out of a background in being a pastor in a local church, that's one of the most pressurised positions where you like to feel like you have it all together all the time. And in business it can be much the same. You know, you feel like everything can be you feel like it's all falling down around you, but you can't let your staff know that. Because if they knew how you were feeling, they would panic, or all sorts of other things could go on. And so sometimes we feel this pressure, like we have to hold it all in or pretend it's not there. And so to just walk away and go, you know what, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And hopefully we can come out of this with a way of, when we can't show it to somebody, we have got ways of dealing with it. And hopefully find some peace in the midst of whatever the situation might be. Okay, so before we flick to what the next slide is, I'm going to introduce the story that sort of underpins for me why I had to really sit down and make this a big deal. Again, I come out of that kind of pastoral, people-caring background. It's probably what led me into coaching more than anything else. It's what led my coaching to be a lot more on a personal level than the business side of things, despite when I got started I thought it was going to be all business, technicality, and honestly administration work more than anything was what I thought I would be supporting people with. But so some of you will know the story that on the 5th of June this year, my 3-year-old Levi was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It kind of came out of nowhere. It did, but it didn't. So for a couple of weeks leading up to the diagnosis, we noticed that Levi was drinking all the time, was going to the toilet all the time, went from being a perfectly toilet-trained boy to wetting his bed every night. And it was because of how much he was drinking. And so Veronica, being a teacher and just being a little bit more in the know of these things than I am, had a bit of an idea that was potentially could have been a type 1 diabetes issue. But Tuesday the 5th of June, I come to work like normal. We couldn't get him into the doctors on Monday. Came to work like normal, did what I did, took him to the doctors that afternoon for the appointment we had booked, come out of hospital on the Saturday. And when you sit down with the doctor and you kind of expect this is a maybe diagnosis, this is kind of what might come of it, but he uses the word emergency, your whole world changes. So Levi had blood sugar levels of 31.3 at that point. His ketone level, they didn't really know. He had a high presence in his urine. They couldn't test his blood there, so they had to send us to the hospital who tested him. I think he was 33.1 was his blood sugar level at the doctor. It was 31.3 when we got to hospital. Ketone level was 2.7, which despite being quite high, we're told is actually quite good for a child that's just about to be diagnosed. If you don't understand kind of how diabetes works, it basically means the body can't absorb the sugar. Target range, 6 to 8. He was 33.1. Basically all that's happening is the sugar is just going round and round and round and round in the body. And so the body produces these things called ketones as a byproduct of digesting other material in the body to get the energy it needs, which can lead to basically acidic blood and all sorts of problems. Thankfully, we caught it before Levi went into what they call diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a disaster. But that's why we were told it was an emergency. This one here is the end of July. So we've been and spent a week in hospital. I lost the entire month of June in the business. So I was gone for the week in hospital. I spent the week there 24 hours a day with Levi. And then when we come out, it was adjusting back to life at home. And then when I did come back to the office, probably another week after that, it was just trying to get the wheels turning again, or just trying to deal with what was going on. And so I lost pretty much the entire month of June. Who in here could lose an entire month and kind of not feel it? Yeah, I'm not seeing a hand anywhere. So again, I lost an entire month. It made a big dent. Most importantly for me, it made a big dent in our momentum, or the momentum that we had going. Because once you stop, it's like you've got to push that big boulder all over again. So a month later, after we're getting a bit of a routine, life's returning to normal, that kind of stuff, Levi had, on the back end of a cold, an asthmatic episode. Wasn't a huge surprise to me, one, because I was a really bad asthmatic as a kid, but two, because they say that can actually come around with diabetic children. Everybody panics when you've got a newly diagnosed diabetic and an asthmatic episode. So he got his first ride in an ambulance that night. There he is there as he quite enjoys the treatment. Obviously doesn't look like it so much there when they've got the spacer up to his face, but quite enjoys the attention and owns the hospital. Everybody loves Levi. But one thing they did there, when you go in with an asthmatic issue, they'll give you generally a steroid called prednisone. You give a diabetic prednisone, your blood sugar goes through the roof, which leads to a ketone nightmare. Very next night. So 2 nights in a row, in the ambulance, up to the hospital we go. This time we had Levi's blood sugars in the mid-20s, I think, and I'd got his ketones are at 1.1, then they were at 2.3, we were almost at his diagnosis level again. I rang the hospital and they said to me, when I said newly diagnosed diabetic, and I didn't have to tell them what was going on, as soon as I said the word prednisone, the nurse just went, ugh, bring him up. And so for 2 nights in a row we were up there. This night here, after 2 months, was the night I hit the wall. And it actually was a good thing that triggered it. When they finally got round to him on the emergency ward, took a blood sugar check and a ketone check, his blood sugars had dropped to 15, which is right on the high border of what's acceptable. Well, sort of right underneath the emergency red line anyway. His ketone levels had dropped to 0.5, which is just below the 0.6 board. At which point the paediatric doctor on the ED that night said to me, "You fixed him, Dad." I then cried for the next 5 minutes. Not because it was, the stress of it all fell apart at that point. And what I said to that doctor at the time was, because everybody kept telling us how well we were handling the situation at a practical level. What I said to her that night was, honestly, if somebody else tells me how well we are handling this situation, I may punch them in the face. Anybody else felt like that? Somebody tells you how well you're doing and you go, if you tell me that again, I'm going to headbutt you. But that's how I felt that night, because the reality was, and that's not their fault, they did everything that was right. They were good with me, they were reassuring, they were telling me that what we'd done is right, and on a practical level she said we couldn't have managed the situation any better than you did. But that didn't handle the stress of what was going on. And in amongst all of that, I had to turn up and try and run a business. So what is some tips? This is my story. This is what I've dealt with in about the last 2 to 3 months. We're still dealing with it today. Nowadays, in that sort of month to 2 months after Levi's diagnosis, every 2 hours we were pricking his finger and checking his blood sugar. So that meant I was up at 2 o'clock every morning. Veronica's pregnant at the moment. I'd rather her not have to do it. And so I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning, pricking his finger, checking his blood sugar levels, sitting up when something was wrong to monitor him again when we tried to treat it, that kind of thing. There were some times where if you came to my office at 212 Street, I was actually literally lying on the floor asleep because I just couldn't function anymore. And actually there's been times where I've splayed out on the lounge here, if anybody has noticed, but I have actually crashed on the lounge in the middle of the SmartHub here at that time. So, but what do we do to keep turning up? Because the wheels, I lost a month. I can't lose another one. Eventually you lose too much longer and everything stops. So what do we do to keep the wheels turning? What we're going to find over these next sort of 5 things is that actually a lot of it, how we deal with it, is how we deal with it before it happens. And so the first key that I find when it comes to how do we keep showing up when it's all falling down is to know what your North Star is. Does everybody know what the North Star is on a practical level? Okay. North Star, basically what we call the brightest star in the sky, is the star that people would navigate by when, before they had a compass or before they were out at sea with an iPhone and could still manage to, navigate by GPS. They would use the North Star to guide. So at the moment when things are going really, really wrong and nothing seems to be working, the guys that are in this just to make money, that's where they really get found out. But if you don't really know that reason, why am I here? Why do I do what it is that I do? Why does my business exist? When I first got started in coaching, that was one of my first go-to questions. I'd sit down for an initial session with people. This is, at the time, I was still trying to figure out what the heck I was doing as a business coach. I was always sit down and ask the question early on, why does your business exist? What astounded me was the amount of people that couldn't tell me. Apart from, maybe trying to make money or whatever, but an actual guiding reason for why we exist, they couldn't tell me. If you ask me, I'll tell you that my business exists to empower people to change the world. I want to help leaders with passion in not-for-profits and charities, and honestly people like Neil and Steph at the back of the room here, to help them do what they want to do to change the world. And so that's kind of one thing that helps me when it's going nuts, to just remember exactly why I'm even trying to keep turning up. One thing you'll notice, you can see, so the name of the North Star is what they call Polaris. Well, that's the name of the current North Star. Apparently it changes. I didn't know that until doing a bit of research. As the world moves and turns, whatever else, the North Star changes. But the name is Polaris. And you can see over there how bright it is in the sky, and that's actually the Big Dipper there, the other constellation near it. But if you have a look over here, you'll notice that Polaris A and Polaris B. The North Star is not actually one star. When you look at them up in the sky, they look like one star because they're so far away, but in reality, they're actually a group or a couple of different stars. And so the reality is what drives us, that North Star that we have in our life, could be a combination of things. The reason why the business exists. The reason why we need to turn up each day and actually make sure we pull this thing off. And at one of the later points, I'll actually get to sort of what makes us think about that, sort of why. Why do we have to make this work? Why is it worth keeping on coming? But as well as knowing what our actual North Star is, and knowing that before, it's no point trying to figure it out once everything's going to crash. You've got to know before. You've got to know why you're turning up, why you're doing it. We need to actually fill the well beforehand. One of the greatest things that we used to be reminded in pastoral ministry was that, you can't serve somebody else, you can't help somebody else when there's nothing there yourself. And so what works for me to help me show up each day as a person who's sort of got it together is not the right way to put it, but is full and focusing well and actioning at my best, is going to be different to you. For some people it is, these are the where we build those practices of things like, the meditation and the mindfulness and the whatever it is that you do to build your own personal resilience and your own personal understanding of the world. And I liken it a little bit to insurance. We were driving home recently from the Haven out at Emu Park, where we just had a few days away, and we noticed that they have one of the labyrinth things on the edge. And Veronica was talking about how for her the whole sort of meditation and mindfulness thing is just not something that she sort of understands or embraces too much. But I liken these kind of things to an insurance policy. Insurance is the biggest waste of time, effort and money until the day you need it. Car insurance is the biggest waste of money that you can pay until you crash your car. House insurance, biggest waste of money until somebody ransacks your house. And so you can go for 20 years paying insurance and it feels like, what the heck am I doing here? And then somebody ransacks your house or a flood comes through or something. That's why. And this idea of having ourselves kind of, whether it's in the right zone spiritually, understanding who we are, that's kind of insurance for when things go wrong. Because it's in that moment that you've got, the tank is full and you can draw from what you've built up over that time or consistently. The second thing, and I learned this incredibly during that time, and you've got a lot of time to think when you spend 24 hours a day by your son's hospital bed in the paediatric ward, is when times are tough, when things are falling down, it's a great opportunity to evaluate and eliminate. And by evaluate and eliminate, if we all sat back and looked at everything that we're doing, everything that we're trying to do, everything that's on our to-do list that's probably actually somebody else's priority, not ours, we'd be astounded at how much is on there that's not really relevant to what our North Star is and what we're trying to achieve and what our mission is in the world to achieve. So in these moments, it's a great opportunity to just sit back and go, actually, you know what, right now, what matters? When Levi was in hospital, the day he was diagnosed, when I was told it was an emergency and you're going to hospital now, like, do you want me to call you an ambulance? That's how fast I need you to get to hospital. I was 20 minutes away from being due in a boardroom at a startup Gladstone. So obviously I rang and said, well, I'm not coming. By the time I left hospital, I wasn't on that board anymore. Not because they sacked me, but because I decided, you know what, I just don't have the capacity right now to do that. And another thing is, going back to that feeling okay to not be okay, it's actually okay to sometimes walk away from things and go, you know what, I don't have the capacity to do this at the moment. I don't have the capacity to be what somebody else needs me to be. I'm one of these people that will try 1,000,001 ideas at once, and I always seem like I'm doing 53,000 different things that are all over the shop. But opportunities now like this, to get that little eraser and go, what do I actually need to just rub off the list, at least just for now, so that I can focus on just what matters, which will help me deal with the issue and keep doing what I need to keep doing as well. I love this quote from Andy Stanley. I don't know if he originally quoted it or not. I've had it quoted at me a lot in my own leadership development. This idea of only doing what only you can do. And in these times when things aren't so great, it's a great motto to live by. So, what is it that's on my list of things that actually, someone else can do right now? This is something we should learn all the time, because all of us, I think, at different times can be really, really bad at delegating and effectively delegating stuff. But right at that moment when we need to be at our best, if we're focusing on only doing what only we can do, then we're going to have capacity in our world to deal with the stuff that's not going so great. Because hiding from the stuff that's not going so great and pretending that it's all good while we try and just keep ploughing forward is only a recipe for disaster in the long term. All right, I like this bit. We've actually got a little exercise now that I like doing with different groups of people when I'm doing sort of resilience and sort of personal training. And what we need to do is, create some distance, not between ourselves and the issue, but between ourselves and what the issue does to us or how we would react to it. So everybody, this one I got the ladies to put out for you, everybody a blank piece of A4 paper. And we all talked about having an issue this year, this month, this week. Don't go with something that you don't want a room of other people to see. Nobody's going to have to, before we start writing, nobody's going to have to read out what you've written down. So this is just you, but other people in the room might see it. But just write down a feeling, a frustration, an issue, something that's kind of annoyed you, made life frustrating. We're going to do this issue that I like to call the face palm. So I often get people to do this, and actually, the reason I call it the face palm is I often get people to do it with their hand. The reason you've got a piece of paper is it's far more effective. So has everybody got your piece of paper? This is going to look really, really good in front of the camera here. Everybody's written down your issue, your frustration, whatever else on the piece of paper?
Well, we've got to have time because we've got to figure out which one.
Okay. I love it. Would you like me to get you? You've got a notepad there if you want. Just make a list. Just pick one. Dartboard of glory kind of job. But once you've got your issue or your frustration or whatever it is, we'll go another 15 seconds for everybody to write something down. But then grab your piece of paper and hold it right in front of your face like an onion. Yep, hold it right up in front of your face. Now tell me, how much can you see around that piece of paper? How much can you see? No, absolutely nothing. And yet often that's kind of when something's going on in the world, in our life, that's how we walk around. Because all we're focused on, all we can see is this feeling, or we're actually driven by the feeling, the frustration, or the issue. So now, take and just hold it, say, just about a foot away from your face. You start to see the world sort of emerge around it now. Start to see the goose at the front of the room again, that kind of thing. Now hold it way out here. Has it gone away? How much can you see around it? You can see basically everything, but it's still there. So at that point you can put it down there. You don't have to face palm yourself anymore. Okay. Everybody knows the saying, talk to the hand. This is our guy that's pretty much what he's saying to his feeling, his frustration, whatever it is. So we don't pretend that it's not there. That's one of the most dangerous things that we can do. But what we are doing, when that thing is right in front of your face and all you can see it, basically at that point, that's who we are when we're wearing the issue, the feeling as our own identity. We are driven by, I'm the father of a kid who just got diagnosed with diabetes, or I'm tired, or I'm frustrated, or I'm stressed, or I'm upset, and it's I am. It's our identity, and it becomes who we are and how we respond. When we hold it just that little bit far out in front of us, and we can kind of see around just a little bit, and we know it's still kind of right there, but we can see a little bit more. At that point, we've said, not I am, whatever your issue, now it's I feel. There's now a difference between me and that piece of paper. It's not who I am, it's something that I feel. The next step when we go, it's way out here, what we've now created the distance to the point is, I notice that I feel. And now I understand. Now once I notice that I feel stressed, I notice that I'm not coping today, I notice that I'm frustrated and I'm about to headbutt somebody, now we can do something about it. And whether that means going and actually dealing with the issue, whether it means separating ourselves, like whatever it is for you, now we're at a point where we can deal. When it's right up in front of your face, you can't see anything else that's going on around it, and honestly you can't deal with it, because it's who you are. I feel that way is still not enough. We have to get to the point where, you know what, I'm actually noticing how I'm feeling about this today. I'm noticing how that affects me. You know, I talked about the times where I've slept on the floor in the office next door, because it got to the point where I actually sat down and it's not, you know, I'm a not functioning person that's trying. I actually was able to sit there at the computer and go, do you know what, I notice at the moment I'm just not functioning. And I need to stop, otherwise something's going to give here. And you know, it's okay to lay down on the hard floor of my office for a minute and just take a breather. This was about 2:30 in the afternoon the first time I did that. The alarm went off, or the message went off on my phone to say Veronica was on her way to pick me up at 3 o'clock. I nearly went through the roof. I thought she must have been waiting for me for an hour. So I'd obviously gone to sleep well and truly. So at that point I obviously needed it. But when you get to that point you say, okay, I'm now noticing that X, Y, Z, now we can do something about it. Talk to somebody about it, which we'll get to again shortly. Now we're going to start getting really, really practical on a day-to-day. And this idea I like to call getting triggered. I do a whole other presentation with teams on this idea of getting triggered. I love this terminology because it actually carries a really, really negative thought if you go out into the world. Particularly if you talk to anybody who has even the slightest passing interest in politics. This idea of getting triggered is, you know, it's used as a bit of a laugh, but it's also a sort of pejorative sort of term. So I love to say things that are slightly negative and turn them on their head and make them positive. So we're not going to get triggered like this guy. Okay? If you're not familiar with the term in kind of popular language in the political circles, the trolls on the internet, getting triggered is basically the point where, you know, somebody offends you to the point where you carry on like a moron. You blow up, you explode. Now, when we're not in the best place, who knows that you can get triggered and something can go wrong, particularly if we're wearing that issue with our identity, with that piece of paper right up in front of our face. All right, what have our post-it notes got to do with this idea of getting triggered? What I'm talking about when it comes to getting triggered is actually setting up triggers in your world that remind you to either act in a certain way, but more to the point, to check in on yourself. I'll show you in the next section one that I use quite regularly. Actually, there's a couple more that I use quite regularly. But it's particularly about, so think about the amount of different interactions you have in a day, and where it's really important is physical triggers. So one of the greatest ones I use is walking through a door. So again, sorry to call on Neil and Steffi, but yesterday I went into a meeting with those guys. That meeting was in the boardroom here at the SmartHub. I don't know whether you noticed it, but as I walk through the doorway into that boardroom, I take a deep breath and I actually check in with myself about, am I in the right space for what I'm about to deal with? And if not, what am I going to do about it in the next 30 seconds? It's just an opportunity. Walking through the doorway is an opportunity to go, am I turning up in this situation as the best version of me that I can? And in a moment where things aren't going so great, if I can't do that and go, am I turning up the best I can? Maybe I need to not be there. Maybe I need to go and deal with something else. Because if I can't show up, if I can't be the best I can, I could just destroy something else. So, again, how this works for me and how this works for you are going to be very different. There's actually, I'll flash up on the screen very shortly, a scripture verse, and that's not to try and throw Bible quotes at you, it's because that's been a great trigger for me. And this scripture verse is still today the wallpaper on my phone. It was on my computer for a long time. And it wasn't used as the trigger to sit down and remember something deeply spiritual, but just to remind me to think about how I was feeling, how I was travelling, and honestly, and the reason it's in the next slide, is have I actually checked in with somebody else recently? So we'll get there. So number 5 again, I'm not going to delve too deeply on the physical triggers thing because it will change for everybody else. It will change for everybody in the room. Number 5, I love this term of, everybody, if you get on the social media, everybody's got their squad goals. So I like this idea of assembling your squad. Remember we said that entrepreneurship and leadership can be really, really lonely? It will only be lonely if you let it. Because the reality is, we've all got people that we can turn to that are in the same situations or have been through something similar. If we choose to have, we will only be lonely if we allow ourselves to be lonely. So this is that scripture I talked about. How this came to be the kind of go-to at that point was the day after we were in hospital. So we spent a full day in hospital. Veronica had been doing her daily Bible reading that day, and she actually read this particular verse. And obviously, for us, that was it was pretty meaningful right in that very moment when you're just going, holy crap, how are we going to deal with this? And so this was just this reminder that, you know what? You're not on your own. And so still to today, this sits on my phone to remind me, not so much, it's not deeply theological or scriptural or faith-driven. Yes, of course, that's a huge part of who I am, but it's just a reminder of, you know what? You're not on your own. Because I'm somebody who does things a lot on my own and forgets that it's okay to go and talk to people sometimes. And we've got in the hub, there's lots of people that you can come and talk to, and I'm looking at some of them in the room now. We've had some of my sessions with Elise that have resulted in tears, or we just sit and talk about what's going on. But sometimes you need to be reminded, you're not actually on your own.
That's good.
And that's the reminder here is, at the end of the day, if you don't know who to talk to, there's somebody here. Hey, you don't know anybody else, you think, I'll come and have a cup of coffee with you. But the reality is there is always somebody around, there's always somebody, and walking through that door on that right-hand side then is one of my other physical triggers. Am I ready to go for today? But that's there because that's a reminder of, there's actually people in this very room.
What's in the right-hand door? What's that?
That's the door coming in over there, on that left-hand, where we come in.
It's the same.
Yeah, the entry to this. It's where we come in and out most of the time during the day, yeah. Okay, this mug gets a bit of a laugh around the SmartHub. Adelaide seems to think I bought it for myself, just to kind of... but Veronica actually bought that for me Father's Day when she was pregnant with Levi, so before we actually had Levi in the world, and that was kind of the Father's Day one. But I don't carry that around and go, oh, look at me, look what my wife got for me. That there is a reminder, when I sit back, it is another one of those physical triggers. Because when I sit back at my desk and things aren't going so well, or maybe I'm just slacking off, which I'm pretty good at doing, I look at that, and that reminds me why I need to turn up every day. That reminds me why I need to actually make stuff happen, because there's a family at home that counts on me to make it work. And even when it doesn't, when things aren't so great, they're still there and they still need me to turn up. So that's why I keep that at work. I've got 1,000,001 coffee mugs I could have brought to work. I brought that one for a very specific purpose. Just the same reason as I pinned those up on my wall.
That's right.
So if you're not familiar with sort of where I sit here in the SmartHub, that on the left-hand side there, that's basically my little productivity page I use every day, my to-do list and all that kind of fun stuff. They sit right above the level of my laptop computer. So I literally cannot look at my second screen without seeing them. Again, I didn't just pin them on the wall there because there's some vacant real estate. I pin them on the wall because when I look at them, it reminds me, how are you going today? How are you turning up today? If something's going on, have you dealt with it today? And so these are just that example. And I know I've thrown them in with the kind of, there's always somebody there, but often it's that question of how are you showing up today that reminds me that, maybe I need to talk to somebody. Maybe I need to tell them it's not so great. Even Homer Simpson uses this technique. If you're not familiar with this story from The Simpsons, this goes back to when Homer was telling the kids of the story of when Maggie was born. And Homer quit his job at the nuclear power plant to do his dream job as a pin monkey at the bowling alley. Everybody's got their dreams, I suppose. And then Marge was pregnant with Maggie and he had to go back to work. And he had to go back grovelling to Mr. Burns. Has anybody seen it? Yeah. So he had to go back grovelling to Mr. Burns to get his job back. And Mr. Burns hung this demotivational plaque, as he called it, which actually says, don't forget, you're here forever. And he was telling the kids the story about why there was no photos of Maggie. And the reason is, he's used them to turn it into do it for her. So even Homer uses this technique.
Yeah, it's good, man.
That's it.
Any questions?
Can you tell us more about triggers? They're really interesting. So you have physical ones, you have the door ones.
Yes. Again, this is going to work differently. So I learned, this is not something I come up with, I learned this actually through doing the high performance study with Brendan Burchard. Yeah, there you go. And so it's come up in a few different things. I'm actually, I've just finished doing his high performance master's program and a few other things like that. And so it's another one. I think I was going to throw in an image there about standing in line, which is one of his major ones, I think. So when you're waiting in line somewhere, it's this opportunity to just sit back and just check in with yourself about, okay, how am I doing right now? And most importantly, it's, again, go back to knowing what your North Star is, right? So what your mission is, what your necessity is, why you're going to do this, and the kind of person you want to be, all forms part of that sort of, that multi-starred constellation. And so these physical triggers are an opportunity to actually just check in with yourself and go, how am I doing with that today? Because a lot of we obviously have external issues that sort of drive how we react and what's going on and how we're feeling it. But a lot of the problems that people have with sort of motivation and that specifically is we want to be this person over here, but we're living like this one over here. And so there's this great big separation between who we are and who we say we are or who we want to be. And so using these physical triggers are ways to help remind us to check in with ourselves and go, you know what, how am I showing up in the world today? And the reason I find it really good when you're going through something that's a struggle, like for me, sitting down at my desk where I just cannot miss this massive big screen that's got that scripture verse on it, is just that reminder that, if you're feeling a little bit alone at the moment, just a reminder that, somebody's there, pick up the phone, it's okay. Other ones are like, the coffee mug is the check-in. You sit down, you see it there, and you go, check, am I doing my best today to make this work? Am I doing my best today to make sure that this keeps going and I'm going to actually provide for my family and those kind of things? And so, it's going to look different for everybody. We're all going to have our own different scenarios. Like I said, the walking through the door is one that is a recommendation out of the stuff like I did with Brendan Burchard, and I found it works because often, if I'm coming in here to speak, I'm walking through that door. If I'm going to the boardroom to a meeting, I'm walking through that door. When I come to the office in the day, I'm walking. So often walking through a door is a change of environment. It's a change. So as you're going into the new situation, it's just that perfect moment to go, am I ready? Am I the right person? And if not, what do I have to do to make it happen? But, then how you build up a list of other triggers and things will look different for everybody. Does that answer the question? Yes.
Can I add something really briefly? It's really interesting because psychologically this happens all the time, but what usually happens is we have all these negative triggers. So you walk up to this point, not this place again. You see that person, no, not really. And so if we can take those triggers and turn them to positive triggers, your whole world changes. And be conscious about doing that, because if you're not conscious, it happens anyway, but to the reverse. Does that make sense?
Awesome.
Can I just say, it's not a comment or anything, but I really feel like this was a great example because so many things when a catastrophe happens, or you think it's a catastrophe, you do hold it there and you can't see around it. So I think that was really actually something I didn't really know. Like naturally you come out of that over time, but sometimes you be stuck in that, like some people forever. But sometimes, even as a resilient person, for a week, and a week's way too long to be stuck.
Absolutely.
To be stuck.
Yep.
So that's really good.
I know, and what I like about it is just a really simple way to think about it. We can really overcomplicate things. So when you get a really simple, and you make a room full of professional people hold up a piece of A4 paper in their face to it, it kind of, it's nice and cool, it's a bit of fun. But it is just a really nice, simple way to think of it.
I have a question. How did you recover from losing a month in your business? Because I think as business owners, we can all agree that that is full on and tough.
I guess I was probably just in a lucky position that it wasn't going to mean that the bank come knocking on the front door. Could I have recovered if that was the case? Maybe not. So I kind of had a little bit of freedom to sort of go back. But it was hard. It took me, just to, you're trying to get a boulder moving. Once you get a boulder moving, you can't stop that thing. But try to get it moving. And so it really was, to me, it often felt like I was going back to square one. And I did ask those questions. I was like, really, why? Am I supposed to be doing this? Am I really in the right place here? Should I just pack up and go and get a job? All that kind of stuff went through the brain in that time. And it really did take through a lot longer than just that month to try and get it. But all you can do really is just get back and pick up where you left off. So go back, and that can be tough for someone like me, because what I tend to sort of dream in the big, spend a lot of time in the big picture and dreaming about big things, and then sitting down and doing the day-to-day detail. I'd rather go fishing. So, and I don't even like fishing, but it's a bad turn of phrase when you don't actually like what you're talking about. But the reality is, to do that thing day in and day out, to sort of, I can sit down and plan and map and strategize and set the systems up. Then when I've got to sit down and implement day after day after day, yeah, I'll just drift. So you've got to sort of come and focus and go, all right, I've just got to, this is how it works, and I've got to sort of snap back into that mode and start doing that again. And the sooner you can just get started again, the sooner you'll get the plane back in the air. It's probably the best answer I can give to that one.
That's good, very good.
Any other questions?
Awesome.
Wow, we're really running on time today. So I will, first of all, see, I didn't overpromise and you didn't underdeliver. You were phenomenal. Thank you so much. I think we can all agree that what you shared is really Now I need to tell you about 2 events that's coming up. Let me just get the paper that Courtney gave me, which I've now lost. Oh, here we go. So, first of all, our next Lunch and Learn is on the 29th of November. So date claimer, 29th of November will be our last Lunch and Learn for the year. We won't have one in December, and the Investment Collective will be here, and the topic is to be advised, so we'll let you know, but claim that date, 29th of November. But before that date, the most exciting news is that we have our next Startup Weekend on the 9th and 10th of November. So yay, I know. So Startup Weekends, for those of you who don't know, is essentially a 54-hour experience where you pitch a business idea on the Friday night. Wendy's breathing deeply. She came into the hub by doing a Startup Weekend. You pitch a business idea on the Friday night, and you work with a team of people over the weekend until on the Sunday you have the makings of a business, and you pitch what you've done over the weekend to a group of judges, and we have great prizes, including SmartHub membership. And so please come along to our Startup Weekend. Registrations are open now. We have an early bird special which ends on the 29th of October. 26th of October. It's 2-for-1 deal, $40 for the whole weekend. That includes 2 people to come along. All food and everything else is included. It's an exceptionally good deal.
You don't have to come with a business idea, right?
No, that's right. You don't actually, thanks Nat, very good point. You don't have to have a business idea. You can just come along, you just have to have an interest in building business, essentially. And the skills and the people you'll meet is phenomenal. The skills that you'll acquire and the people you'll meet, phenomenal. But also there are great mentors in the room on the day, on the Saturday and the Sunday, and they'll come in and they'll help you. And so it's essentially about extending your network and improving your business skills. Any other questions? Did I explain that well? Cool. So the 9th and 10th of November. So who's coming to our Startup Weekend? Oh! Come on.